I am being watched. Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Person of Interest, Season 2, Episode 17. It's called Proteus. So spoilers for the episode as always. So how do we follow up what I think is arguably the best episode of the show so far? Which was so exciting because it was doing these fresh different things. Especially when I don't think there was any real expectation from myself or probably the audience at the time that they were going to continue some of the things that they did in the last episode. It very much in the same way that they introduced Root and we went back to normal episodes for a while. It felt like we were going to do that again. So, does this episode coming after the Shaw introduction episode, is it going to struggle because of that? And I think what they did here is smartly follow up with a really fun premise, right? It's a traditional episode, but it's a very fun premise in how it actually plays out. It's got a lot of atmosphere. It's set during a storm, mostly on an island, Owen Island, which I assume is a real place on the outskirts of New York. And it's basically a whodunit. It's a bunch of people trapped in this police station, the few people who are left on this island, because it's mostly been evacuated by the storm, and one of them is a serial killer. And obviously this isn't like a larger mythology thing for the show. There's a few little things that they talk about that it might, tie into the larger world of the show. But for the most part, it's just a pretty typical, there's a person of interest, there's a murderer, there's a killer, and we have to figure out who it is. And we do all this in this cool setting of the storm, and you've got Carter try to help from a distance and try to get to them. Finch try to get in to help Reese when he figures out some stuff. All of it is just a good fun time. It maybe falls down a little bit in the back third, because I do think, well, two things. I think it's actually very, very painfully obvious who the killer is the entire episode. I think that's, a slight problem. Although the bigger problem I had was that I think the performance from the actor playing the killer, when he was pretending to be a normal dude, right? When he was pretending, and we're in, spoilers, I gave the warning. When he was just pretending to be an FBI agent, while I thought it was obvious that he was the killer, his performance was fine. There was nothing wrong with the performance. Once he was revealed to be the killer and he started acting like himself, his performance got really hammy. Like, he was chewing the scenery. What gave me away? He's like, the way he talked to Finch when he's doing all of his monologuing towards the end really felt like he was chewing the scenery, and maybe that was intentional because they were going for a pulpier episode and they wanted to give it that vibe. I don't know, but it definitely stuck out a little bit, and it did feel a little cartoony for that last 10 minutes because of that. The overall premise is really fun. The start of the episode and the end of the episode kind of bookend with conversations about the machine and what's going on right now. We find out that the machine's not giving them numbers in 3 days, and then all of a sudden it gives them 6 numbers at once, and these 6 numbers are spread out across the country. Only one is local in New York, and that's the guy they're looking for on this island. Basically, it turns out that this serial killer he's killed all these people, but he's been sort of taking their identities after he kills them for a while, and ultimately the machine was giving them as much information as possible so that they could figure out what it was. And it's quite interesting at the end of the episode that Reese kind of theorizes that, the machine actually did something smart. By giving us all these previous victim numbers, it was a big clue as to how this killer was operating, and it gave us more information to work with. So he sees that as a way the machine helped them. Whereas Finch still thinks that there's a problem with the fact that there was no numbers for 3 days and that something's not quite right. At the start of the episode, he theorizes that the whole, the hard drive thing from that previous episode and whatever was uploaded might have done something to the machine, or something to just the internet at large, which is affecting the machine. Obviously, one of the things I thought of quite quickly is that has Root done something? Has Root either in some way... I doubt she's found the machine by now. It feels like maybe a bit too much of a leap to get to that, but has she done something that's maybe resulted in a change in some way? Because we know she's looking for the machine. But either way, seemingly it's acting a little differently. Although, still gives them numbers, if anything gives them more information than usual, and they're able to solve this crime. But to be fair, on Finch's point though, Someone that they could have saved did die. Well, technically two, because someone dies during the episode. But the FBI agent that the killer's impersonating, they find eventually in the back of the car. Right, Reese finds him late on in the episode, and the idea being that if the machine had acted the way it's supposed to, they could have got this FBI agent's number before the murder happened, because there was enough there that the machine could have predicted this murder. This agent was kind of going rogue, not in a bad way, but was investigating all these because we hear that this FBI agent wasn't necessarily a field agent. He was more someone who dealt with white collar crime and digital crimes and things like that, and clearly had been noticing some kind of pattern with these various people that had been murdered, and was looking into it, and seemingly went looking for this alias the same way that Reese and Finch have, and it's ended up with him being dead. Obviously, Carter calls him early in the episode, and we see the guy that's pretending to be the killer, and that's I think that's the big thing that's meant to throw off the audience, to believe that he really is the agent because he answers the phone call. But obviously all that really means is that he has the real FBI agent's phone. That's all that means. But something about the performance, something about the way he was presented, I always thought it was obvious that it was going to end up being him. So the machine could have potentially had them save that FBI agent, but didn't. And it does make you wonder, is the machine sending 6 numbers more than it normally would to give them more hints and clues, because it feels bad that it kind of missed the boat on that a little bit? And if it did miss the boat, if it was supposed to send the number the day before or 2 days before, and it didn't, then why? What stalled it? And Finch at the end of the episode is kind of like, oh, the storm is just beginning, Mr. Reese, and that's kind of the ominous cliffhanger we leave it on. So that's the stuff that's more to the broad picture right now, the broad person of interest storylines going on. The actual case itself is just a fun standalone story for the most part, which is good. I enjoy a good Storm episode where characters are kind of isolated and they can't really go anywhere, or if they do, it's extra dangerous because of the weather. I always enjoy that kind of atmosphere, and I think TV shows like this always get to have a few of these episodes throughout their run. A stormy night, whether it's a spooky night or a stormy night or maybe a blizzard kind of thing. You always get these variations on these types of episodes that put characters in a kind of an isolated place. Because so much of this episode is, characters trying to get to the location to then join in the fun. Finch being the first one when he finds the evidence that there's been a killer here. This guy's not just missing, his teeth and some ashes are in this furnace down at the bottom of his building. And that, quickly suggests he gets Carter to investigate the crime scene after that, because the police should probably be looking at this stuff. Once he's like, oh, we can't contact Reese. That's the other thing the storm does, is it cuts out a lot of the communication. He, flies his own way into the island with his pilot's license. So Reese is surprised when Finch is just sitting there in the police station in handcuffs. The local policewoman has handcuffed him because he recklessly landed his plane in the middle of the island. Which would have been fun to see. That I get why we couldn't, because it would have been a very, very big budget moment to show him land, because he says he landed in the middle of the main street, which was flooded. He needed water to land, and there was water in the street. I'm thinking the movie Hard Rain in my head, the Christian Slater and Morgan Freeman movie. I'm thinking that in my head with a plane landing, but obviously that, flooding the whole street or the CG to do that would be, a lot. So I get why we don't see it. It would have been fun to see though. I want to give Reese some shit here, actually. The start of this episode, the very first scene, is them getting out of a movie theater, which is smart storytelling, actually, because it's telling us that they're not busy. It's telling us that they haven't had a number, because they're just going to see a movie during the day. And they're with Bear. In fact, Finch is pretending that Bear is his legal guide dog so that he could take him anywhere. But we see on the marquee that they saw Rashomon, the Akira Kurosawa movie, which is really cool. And Reese comes out and says, we should have saw Once Upon a Time in the West, less subtitles. Now, before I say what I'm about to say, I do want to just up front say, I actually do think Once Upon a Time in the West is a better movie than Rashomon. I think Kurosawa has better movies than Once Upon a Time in the West, but I don't think Rashomon's one of them. I think there's other better Kurosawa movies. But the sentiment of Reese not liking subtitles has made me like him just a little bit less. Be a man of culture, Reese. In fact, I'm surprised you don't speak Japanese, frankly, right? Given your line of work and all the stuff you do. You clearly speak a lot of other languages. Oh, shucks. One you don't speak. Enjoy cinema, okay? Don't be a pleb, Reese. Enjoy cinema. It's important. Anyway. So yeah, the actual main story, like, you know, there's Reese running into the FBI agent, or, well, the killer, pretending to be an FBI agent, and them sharing details. I do love this running thing that we've had for over a season now, where Reese just whips out that Texas Ranger badge. And I love that we don't have to explain it, because it's that same badge that he got back in season 1. I really like that. It's been a running thing that he keeps using. To the point where even when Carter's like trying to phone the police station to get in touch with him, she says, "Hey, that Texas Ranger," or not Texas Ranger, yeah, U.S. Marshal, yeah, whatever, the Marshal badge. She's like, "Hey, is he there? Is the Marshal there?" Kind of thing. It's just fun that this has been a running thing throughout the episodes. Some set piece moments in there obviously include Finch using his equipment, which is supposed to be for chasing storms or seismology or something like that, but it conveniently can double as a lie detector. So they hook up a lie detector test and have the FBI/killer interview all the people there to see which one of them could be the killer. And there's a couple of shady ones. There's a guy who's being kind of secretive, and it turns out it's because he's actually went AWOL. He's supposed to be on his second tour in the military, but he is trying to run to Canada, and that's why he's being sketchy. There's a fisherman who turns out is smuggling drugs, and that's why he's lying and being sketchy. I think for this episode to like sort of went above and beyond in my estimation, I think what I would have liked is even more of a focus on this group of characters and really starting to like maybe get to know them a little bit more, so that when they start accusing each other, we can have more fun with that. They were just not focused on enough that it never really felt like they were a serious contender for who the killer is. And maybe that's why who the killer was so obvious to me. I mean, part of it was how Reese found him. It was just kind of convenient that, or it just made a lot of thematic sense that the killer's pretending to be here investigating just like Reese is, right? They're both basically using the same cover story. And the killer even kind of alludes to that when he's talking to Finch later, and he says that him and Finch are alike because they both erase their real identities and pretend to be other people. And, you know, Finch gets defensive and says, "No, I save people, you kill people, we're not the same." And obviously he's right. And maybe partially that's why ultimately this is just a sort of fun fluff episode as opposed to like a really cool thematic episode, because most of the really great thematic episodes, they won't point out the similarities between our characters and the character of the week, because it's more there for you to discover. Whereas here, you've got the killer just flat out saying it, so it's a little bit more on the nose, I guess. So, but, you know, I do think that's a solid hint at the start that, you know, maybe this guy is using the exact same cover as Reese by pretending to be an FBI agent, and that's exactly how it pans out. Yeah, the lie detector stuff's alright. Obviously, after Carter tries to call the station on the radio, the policewoman gets stabbed when the power goes out, and everyone kind of freaks out a little bit, and, you know, they'll try to figure out who did it. That could have been a good bit of fun. I guess the other thing that maybe is a slight kink in the episode is that it would have been nice to see Finch actually maybe kind of discover who the killer is. He kind of just already has when we cut back to him. He goes into the interrogation room and he's looking through the killer's jacket, and we find out after that he's already kind of clocked that it's him, because the lie detector, which isn't connected to the people, it's only like picking up the vibrations through the table. Whenever they weren't in the room, it was getting more erratic because the killer was more tense and his heart rate was going up. I feel like it'd have been nice to see that moment of realization. I mean, the moment itself is quite cool because it's dark and you only see the killer behind them when the lightning flashes. Which is a very, I won't say cliched, but it's a very kind of, you know, standard trope kind of a moment in this type of story. It's one of those things where if they'd really played into the whodunit element of it more, I think I'd have had more fun with that kind of reveal and the sort of the fun cheesiness of it. I think maybe I think for this 40, 2-minute episode or whatever it works out to be, there's probably maybe just too many things to juggle. Because we also have a subplot with Carter and I always forget his name because he's not a regular character. Beecher. Beecher's trying to talk to her about why she's ghosting him while she's investigating this stuff for Finch and Reese and looking over security footage and things like that. I think all that stuff is good. Like, I actually really like this idea of her trying to get to the island as well, because she has new information and she does end up saving the day with Finch. I also like that Finch can't tell that it's her exactly at first because his glasses are off. I don't think we've ever realised that that's just how bad his eyesight is, but he's like, detective? Because the killer by this point is taking his glasses off and is wearing them to indicate that he's going to become Finch. But of course, he doesn't know who Finch really is, so very, very difficult for him to pull that off if he actually tried to go through with it. And then we get sort of the double scare because we already knew he was wearing a bulletproof vest. But then Cal Beecher, ends up being the final save where he takes out the killer, which maybe suggests that regardless of whatever maybe he's got on his record, that maybe he is ultimately still a good person. And given that we've kind of let Fusco have a redemption arc, it's not out of the realm of possibilities to suggest that Beecher should be given the same leeway. But Carter is very cold with him this episode, and Beecher gets offended when she kind of is suggesting that he's dirty, and is equally kind of offended that she has her hand on her gun at one point, as if she's scared of him. Like, that's like hit him kind of badly. So it's left in kind of an ambiguous place at the end, but as to what she's going to do with him next, if it'll progress further, I suspect that maybe there'll have to be some honesty if there is. I actually genuinely don't know how much we're going to do. I feel like Sterling K. Brown can't stick around forever because it feels like he's got other projects to go do. I don't know when This Is Us started, but it feels like it couldn't have been too much after this. But I have no idea. But like it's all fine stuff, but it does take up a fair bit of screen time. And I think there's a lot of fun stuff setting up the storm at the start of the episode and getting out to the location. But by the time you have Finch there at the police station and you've introduced all these other like C characters that come in, we've got like a business owner who is building a hotel on the island. We've got like a newly married couple there. There's sort of like a older middle-aged guy who's got a drinking problem, and there's like his niece or someone is there. Like there's a whole like host of characters that all very, very quickly get introduced as people who are trapped here on the island for one reason or the other. They didn't evacuate with other people, and they're going to be our small group who could get picked off, and any one of whom, well, at least to the men. I think it's pretty clear the killer's a guy, from everything that's happened. But they'll probably, the killer's here, right? And when someone, when it becomes clear that someone has burned some identification in the back, it's like, oh, the killer's here. He's one of the group. I think maybe if I was to sort of suggest how to restructure this episode, I would take out like half the Carter stuff. But there's a whole scene where she's on like a Skype call to a professor of like the first victim, and it kind of felt like that was just eating up some time that could have been done with like developing more of this core group. And I probably would have like started a little further into the story. I would have probably started like closer to the police station stuff, right? I would have started where Reese is already on the island, and maybe we sort of like get filled in as to why he's here and what he's looking for. But clearly that wasn't the goal, was just to create a simple bunch of characters trapped in one location, and one of them's a killer and they have to figure out who it is. But it kind of becomes that though, which is why it kind of feels like maybe it would have been wiser to get to that setup a lot quicker, and we could have really milked that for all the fun drama that could come out of it. Which is not to say that I dislike a lot of the setup before that. I love all the Storm stuff before that. It just kind of feels like the premise that it sets up could have used more of the episode's runtime to really play with it, as opposed to kind of being just squished into the back half of the episode, It's the sort of thing where if this was a movie that was 2 hours long, the amount of setup to get to the police station would have been just right, because we'd still have over an hour of like everything we could do with that. But because we've only got 40 or so minutes, by the time we get all that set up here, it feels like they should have gotten to some of that a little bit quicker. So yeah, obviously I sound like I'm being quite critical. I want to make it very clear, this was actually a very entertaining, fun, easy to watch episode, which pokes a few interesting questions about where we're going with the larger show, But for the most part, it's just, hey, here's a fun setup, here's a vibe, have some fun. Reese is going to basically be not involved in the final confrontation because he's dealing with the boat guy who's tried to kill him with a harpoon gun and is actually trying to drag him off the pier when he wakes up. And it's almost a nothing moment. I would have even put it after all of the tense stuff was wrapped up, because it felt like they were setting up that he might jump in at the last second, and it's like, no, it was Carr that jumped in, and then it was Beecher that jumped in, and they saved Finch. So, you know, that's fine. So, yeah, it's a fun episode, but it's not an important episode in the grand scheme of things, it feels like. I think I enjoyed it a lot more than maybe it even deserves, just because I kind of like the type of setup that it's going for, and I like the vibe that it's going for. But it's not the best of, like, this type of episode compared to other TV shows that have done this type of episode. And there's no reason why Person of Interest, which has very high quality episodes, can't compete with what other shows have done with this type of premise. It absolutely could be a great example of that, and maybe they'll give it another try somewhere down the line. Maybe we'll get a season 4 or 5 episode where they do something similar to this. You know, not a hard watch by any means, but you know, I think it was probably smart though to just go with a fun episode after that last one, just because, well, it's going to be tough to make it feel as exciting and as important if we're not just going to continue those threads. So if we have to do something different, then let's just go for a completely different win, a completely different type of victory. And I think that was a smart choice. I don't think they completely, you know, like knocked it out of the park by any means, because there are some kinks in the episode, but decent enough time overall. So that is my thoughts on Proteus. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. You can, of course, like, subscribe, all the usual things, get the bonus content over in Patreon if you want to support everything and help keep the lights on. You can do that over at patreon.com/MaleFuzzTV. Check out the other shows that I'm reviewing, working through X-Files on season 2 of that as well. Some new shows on right now, Constellation, Shogun, to varying degrees of quality, but certainly interesting enough to talk about. So thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?